Theresa Govert. So, it's my first day, and I'm all alone. I've gotten into an airplane at JFK, flown 16 hours across the Atlantic, studied for 2 months, and I've gotten into a bus and traveled across the barren landscape of Botswana, where the landscape changes from dry and dusty with ostriches roaming to lush and green with elephants in the streets. And so I'm a Peace Corps volunteer. I've landed in the village where I'll spend the next 2 years. A village called Ketchikau, Botswana, which is in Chobe National Park, which has the highest concentration of African elephants in the world. I arrive at my house, and I'm doing all the things anyone who's moved into a new home would do. I'm putting up curtains, I'm putting photos of loved ones on the wall, and most importantly, I'm worrying about where I'll buy toilet paper. That was the biggest concern. I was like, oh my goodness. Which there was a little shop where I could get toilet paper. It wasn't a big deal, but it was a concern. I'm taking a deep breath because it's the first time I've been alone in the past 2 months. I've been living with a host family, training with 60 noisy American Peace Corps volunteers, and it feels so good to be alone. But I also realize that I'm alone. And for anyone who's ever been alone, they know what that feels like. So I'm standing there thinking, what did I do? And I'm alone, and how am I going to move forward? And I hear shuffling outside my door, and some giggles, and I hear Coco, Coco, which is the equivalent of knocking on my door. I go to the door, and I meet Tsepan. She has her hands behind her back, she takes the biggest deep breath, and she says, Dumela kebidua Tsepan. And I laugh, and I say, Dumela kebidua Theresa kebitao piwa Peace Corps, which means, my name is Theresa, and I'm a Peace Corps volunteer, and she immediately burst into giggles, as everyone will do for the next 2 years whenever I introduce myself in Setswana. And from behind her back, she produces a book, and she asks if we could read. I quickly realized that this book is actually a song that many of us are familiar with, and we sing it every single night for the next 2 years.
Pum pum pum. Shall I play for you? Pum 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 pum. On my drum.
So many of you will recognize that song as The Little Drummer Boy. And for me, religion aside, the story that song told became so important because it's this message. The little boy who has no material gift is looking for what he can bring to someone he really admires. He doesn't have material wealth, he's not particularly connected, and that lesson was something that Sepang and I built within our relationship. What are the gifts we can give each other? For her, she was continuously giving me the gift of community, the gift of connection, the gift of music and laughter. I always felt like I was on the receiving end more than the giving end. I hoped that I was giving her the opportunity to practice English and to have a friendship with an adult who took her seriously. And this became my motto for the Peace Corps. What can I bring that I don't really know exactly what I'm doing? And so, as a Peace Corps volunteer, you're tasked with addressing some enormous problems. It's like global poverty. Okay, thank you. And so, one of the tasks I was given was to address gender-based violence. And as many of you know, gender-based violence is historic. It cuts across all cultures, regardless if you live in the United States, if you live in Botswana. And 1 in 3 women will experience violence in her lifetime. I went to my colleagues and I said, and we talked about the idea that people weren't engaging with this topic because it was politicians that were talking to them, or public health workers that were talking to them, or people who didn't look like them talking to them, and it meant nothing. So, working together, we came up with a model where we got everyone to first reflect on what gender-based violence meant to them and their families. And we talked to everyone. We talked to cashiers and cleaners in grocery stores. We talked to women who took care of children in nursery centers. We talked to police officers who worked at the United Nations. And what we found was everyone, once they had reflected on the problem, wanted to do something. And we had to give them a way to engage and interact. So we came up with this idea of using art and music and dance, because it's something we use when we talk about important problems or have big events in our lives. So if there's a wedding, we dance. If there's a funeral, we're singing. When we're dealing with some of the biggest problems, we're bringing in art and music to kind of cope with them. And so we organized these large events that happened across the country where everyone brought their own unique gifts. So traditional dancers, and this isn't how everyone dresses every day. These are people dressed in traditional dance, the same way if someone was dressed in like Revolutionary garb for a drum and fife corps. That's the equivalent. But traditional dancers came and danced songs of sorrow. Singers who are on national television sang songs about losing loved ones or having loved ones go through horrific acts of violence. And that was one of the most impactful things we did. Everyone came up every day to me and all of my colleagues and said, I've never thought about this topic because I've never been engaged, because I've never been able to contribute something to it. And so, as we're thinking about all the problems facing the world, and there's a lot of them, we've traditionally had this model of hierarchy where at the top we place the people who make money, and at the bottom we place the people who make art or take care of children, or who in other ways are healing the world, are taking care of farms. We have to move from this model where we've stacked people on top of each other and move to one that's more synergistic. If we're talking about poverty in America, we need politicians and we need policy wonks. We need business makers, but more importantly, we need people at the table who are going to talk about things like institutional racism and a broken criminal justice system. We need local farmers who will talk about how to bring their products into school systems where kids might be going hungry. We need artists who will share their stories of their own communities. And we need everyone. We need everyone to think about, what is it that I do in the world that lights me up? How can I educate myself so I can take that skill that I have, whether it's public speaking or taking a photograph, whether it's exploring underwater and making sure that 55% of your team is female, to address these problems. Because the fact is, 65% of the jobs that this generation, that kids will have today, are in industries and fields we haven't even dreamed of yet. We're going to have to develop our skills, like critical thinking, our passions, like Instagram, maybe. And we're going to have to take those to address these problems. Because if no one survives, or if society is structured in a way that people are being oppressed at the bottom, none of us are free. So I'm going to ask everyone to think about, what gift do you bring to the world? The Dalai Lama said that our most important meditation of today is critical thinking followed by action. We've been thinking critically about a lot of the problems. Now it's our time to think about what we have, what gift we have, and what way we can put that into action in the world. So start small, meet someone today, introduce yourself, say, hi, my name's Theresa. I really like bringing people together. How can you and I work together? Bring it to your community, bring it to the state of Connecticut, and keep having those conversations, and move that triangle to a network that works synergistically, that is interconnected and complex, and values everyone, because that's the only way we'll move forward. Thank you.